Welcome to Planning and Beyond, the podcast where financial planning meets human understanding. I'm your host, Ashley Kwame, and today I am thrilled to be joined by my friend, my colleague, Daniel Kopp, CFP, who we are going to be diving into and talking all about his specialty in an area that is really near and dear to my heart, which is serving our military clients. Daniel brings invaluable insights into the unique psychological and emotional landscape that service members, veterans navigate when it comes to money and financial planning. Daniel, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to have you here.
Thank you for inviting me, Ashley. It's a privilege to come on shows like this, even more so since I'm a regular listener and excited to give back to the audience what I feel like I've already gotten so much from you and the many amazing guests that you've interviewed already.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I have no doubts that you are going to be giving back because you're brilliant. I've listened to you, I've heard you speak, I'm familiar with your work. So I'm excited to have you on and sharing all of your wisdom here today. But before we jump into all of that, can you share a little bit with people who are listening, a little bit about your background? This is a unique area, client population to serve. What
Yeah.
drew you specifically to working with military clients?
I serve them because I was one. I am still part of that military veteran tribe. So this is a career transition for me as a financial planner now. I spent the first 9 years of my working life after college in ROTC in the Air Force as an officer, doing something very different called air battle management. Short answer is kind of like combat airspace management. But a lot of life circumstances happen. We may get into those today with my late wife, Sarah, before her health kind of took a serious decline. That turned me onto the path of ultimately what was now financial planning. So as I ultimately separated from the military at about that 9-year point, I was like, well, I got to do something else, and found my way to what is now, I believe, is my true calling, which is financial planning. And so it was very easy for me, having lived the life, speaking the language, understanding all the stuff, to transition and pivot to offer a service model and financial planning expertise because I was there. And when you're in the tribe, like, you speak the language, you know the stuff. So it was an easy fit. And sure enough, the marketing, at least on the military side, has tended to be one of the easiest things from that. Obviously, the planning expertise has to be table stakes for that. But yeah, it's been a wonderful way to give back and serve my tribe.
Yeah, I love that and so appreciative that you do that. So many people might know, and you do as well, Clayton, active duty in the Army. And I remember being stationed, we were stationed in South Korea, and the Army bases compared to the Air Force bases, I mean, it just was kind of unfair. Like, Air Force just has it figured out. Like, they've
Yes,
got the good stuff
that's very true.
there. I won't speak for Clayton, but I was always very envious of the Air Force bases, at least over in Korea while we were there. They just have the good stuff. It just
Yes.
wasn't fair. So I wish Clayton had joined the Air Force, but
Yeah, that's the way it
hindsight.
goes. Sometimes it was just based on service age. The Air Force is a newer branch. And for a long time during the Cold War, there was just more money thrown at the Air Force, which helped build nicer bases and facilities. The running joke in the joint world, service world, is, how do you know how to build an Air Force base? Well, first thing you do is situate the runway. Second thing you do is situate the golf course and everything else around that.
There you go. Yeah. See, yeah, man. Yeah. Hindsight's 2020. So if I had to go back, I would definitely encourage Clayton to do, man, go Air Force. Don't be in the Army. Nothing against, well, I guess kind of something against the Army. They need nicer facilities, some different colors other than brown. But I'm so glad that you're here. And I appreciate you sharing that a little bit about your journey. And that makes sense as far as why you would be so passionate about serving military clients and veterans, given just your history, your experience there personally on the personal side. Can you maybe share a little bit with us, though, from, I guess, the psychology kind of standpoint, or even like the culture maybe place? What makes military clients different from non-military, or as we call it, civilian clients, in terms of how they approach money or financial decisions?
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to this. I would say one of the first things is sort of the rugged self-reliance that happens, tends to be in a group of people who join the military, right? I think the latest statistics, like less than 1% of the U.S. population has served at any one point or time. So it's a minority of the population who raises their right hand and says, yes, I will write a blank check up to and including my life for the service to this country and the Constitution. Now, obviously, that impacts the service member, but as you mentioned, your own journey, the military spouse, right? Families get brought along with that. So, for those who aren't familiar, right, what does that mean? Well, you go off to some sort of basic training or officer school, and then you get assigned a job. You may or may not have opportunity to influence that or give a vote for what you do. Certainly, very little votes, not a whole lot of control of where you get stationed, where you go. And so, the military will pluck you up and then send you to the far corners of the world or the US, where you probably show up not knowing a single soul, right? And you've got to make life work, settle down, build a community, restart. And then guess what? A couple years later, you're going to do it all again. We call it PCS, permanent change of station. Here we are in the middle of summer recording this, and this is PCS season here in
It
the United
is.
States,
It
and lots
is.
and lots of people. So pretty much everybody military, generally 2, 3, 5 years, something in that range for most people. And you're going to do it all again. And you're going to pick up and you're going to move and go to a new place and settle it. So it just creates a culture, whether you started with it or not, of like, pull yourself up by your own bootstraps, like figure it out. You know, you're going to have friends and people that you can quickly connect with because you're all living that same life. But at the same time, you know, if you don't do that, then you're going to kind of get stuck, left behind. So that creates a culture in which you, as a financial professional trying to work with them, you know, there's skepticism about some of the things in financial services as well because of the predatory nature of some financial institutions that target and work with the military community. But most military clients that I work with have never had a true financial advisor, financial planner before. So if they're coming to you, recognize that there's that rugged do-it-yourselferism that's kind of just inherent in the culture.
Yeah, I love that, and I 1,000% agree with all of that. So seeing it on the clinical side, but also with Clayton and just hearing some of the military professionals that he's come to work with, whether it's active duty and or veterans, there is that do it yourself kind of aspect there. I'm curious though, you mentioned a little bit here kind of about culture and just like the mindset when it comes to how they are thinking about just their life, their lifestyle, characteristics there. Have you seen, or how have you seen maybe some of that apart from maybe just the kind of do it like yourself? How has that translated maybe into financial decisions around, I know that you're big on estate planning. You're an estate planning guru, you and Emily, you and my girl Emily. How does that kind of translate, though, to other areas of financial planning, making financial decisions?
Yeah, risk perception, risk tolerance, risk capacity, risk composure, things that we might think about strictly in the context of maybe a portfolio allocation, stocks versus bonds, all that kind of stuff, is very much different in the military community, in my experience, because again, you've got people who have volunteered to go do hard things like join in the first place. And then you've got subcultures within the military community of people doing hard things like spending long times and distances away from family, choosing to go do hard things like special forces training and all the kind of lifestyle that goes along with that. So when you start talking about risk component and risk capacity and things like that, this population, my experience anecdotally, is they're just higher tolerance towards a lot of those things. And that has positive effects. Like you probably maybe have an easier time getting equity allocations to the portfolio, but maybe a more difficult time encouraging them to do things on the risk mitigation side, like estate planning, like life insurance. Even though the military provides free estate planning, which is typically basic wills, healthcare power of attorneys, healthcare directives, financial power of attorneys, free to military members. So that's part of the JAG. And so as a result of that, it should be easy, right? It's free and generally mandatory before you go on a deployment. But it's amazing to me how many people still haven't done that or put it off or don't want more life insurance because I'm invisible, right? I'm 1,000 feet tall. I joined the big bad Marine Corps, whatever the case may be. I don't need any life insurance. My family's going to be fine, even though, you know, you're going to face some increased risks or just general risks in general.
Yeah, it can be real challenges too. And I think that it's certainly the case with military clients, but also just clients in general, right? Those things are so far off in the future, right? That'll quote never happen to me, right? And that mindset. And so that can be a challenge. But then you couple that with, the risk piece that you talked about. And ooh, good grief. That can definitely be a challenge on the advisory standpoint. I guess in that lens, taking kind of all of that into consideration, I would imagine trust is a huge piece of being able to help clients, if they're resistant to those decisions, right? Helping them see where that can be helpful. I would imagine, right? Trust is a huge component of that. How or what have you learned about earning, maintaining trust with service members and veterans? Is it any different than maybe other clients, non-military clients, I would say?
That's an excellent question because it goes to the heart of like communication style. Like most military families who are going to be in a busy, young, professional stage of their life, time is at a premium, and even more so with some of the ops tempo that many units are have. So we call it the bluff, bottom line up front, like short, concise, get to the point, generally tends to be better received by that community versus a 10,000 word flowery thing that buries the lead in the middle. That's not going to go over as well. Also, just the little things like setting clear expectations. I mean, this certainly has application across all client relationships, but probably even more so of this, right? The military life often brings, we call it the hurry up and then wait.
Yes, hurry up and yes.
Sorry, Ashley, I'm getting you triggered here.
I'm having my own response to that.
Okay,
Yes.
we got lots of fun phrases like mandatory fun, like
Oh yeah.
I don't know if you know that. And the whole idea of military is good at sometimes changing the plan. So military people tend to be flexible, adaptable, but that doesn't mean that you as a professional should throw that extra stress onto them. So when you say you're going to do something, do it. Keep your word. Like timeliness, another key factor of promptness. Build that into your business model. I mean, don't promise a 4-hour email reply if that's not going to work, right? But if you say you're going to respond within 2 business days, then you should do that, right? So all these little factors, much like much of the population, but even more so with this community, is going to help to engender trust. And also, like if you personally are wanting to work with military, but maybe you didn't serve yourself, like tying it back to a family story, maybe someone who did. So getting that family connection, for better or worse, I think in the United States, we are trending more towards, I don't even know what to call it other than like almost a caste system, where one of the major factors of people today choosing to enlist, choosing to go and serve, go to the academies and commission or ROTC, something like that, is because they did have a family member connection. Okay. So if you have anything like that in your background bio, highlight that, share that, and use that as a way to engender rapport.
I will say that when I was doing full-time couples therapy, I would just was fairly new to kind of the area. So I'm located here where Fort Eisenhower, previously known as Fort Gordon, here in the Augusta area. And I would serve couples, and I had a lot of military couples. And it was always so fascinating and kind of shocking to me that when my new couples found out that my husband Clayton had served, that I also had worked for the US Army as a civilian. That trust was like just almost immediate. And I would get referrals too because of that. If like, clients would say, like, you understand what we're going through. You know exactly what we're talking about. So look, I'll be honest, sometimes I did and sometimes I didn't. And I would have to say, like, hey, like I actually don't know like anything that particular area or what that acronym. But I think you're speaking to something around the story piece and sharing that connection that clients, when they can see a part of themselves in you, it does help to build that trust factor there with them. And they'll be more likely to engage and, open up and trust in the process and ultimately trust in you and your advice.
Yeah. People work with people they like and trust.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So now many people know that when it comes to service members, that oftentimes, or it's not unlikely that there can be some emotional stuff attached to their journey of being in service, right? More specifically, sometimes service members encounter traumatic events, traumatic stress. There are just unique situations that service members experience that civilian clients just don't, right? And those, whether it's trauma from deployments or what have you, they show up and they don't just go away just because maybe we're not in service anymore, or we're not on deployment anymore. I know that from at least my experience, those can be really difficult to navigate, those types of stresses or traumas, if you will. Can you share a little bit about maybe what you've seen or maybe even experienced when it comes to the unique challenges of service members who maybe do struggle with post-traumatic stress disorder or any other kind of trauma as a result of the military and their financial decision making or financial planning?
Yeah, that's such a deep question there. Speaks to
Sorry, Daniel, we're
yeah,
going to get right to it.
is the continuum, which is financial planning, counseling, blending into financial therapy work that I'm so passionate about doing. Before we go there, though, I'm going to just pause and just say, like, again, many people join the military from a wide strata of socioeconomic statuses and families of origin. But as a general rule, more often than not, it's probably the bottom quintiles rather than the top, because military officers a way out of those circumstances with education benefits, getting away from challenging and rough communities, and also that family connection, right? The adventure of the spirit. So many people coming in the military are coming from backgrounds that maybe had more challenging money origin stories. So that's going to be layer number one. Layer number two is going to be then that rugged self-reliance, just figure it out. But at the same time, a lot of, much like other parts of our money culture in the United States, shame and fear of like making mistakes. One helpful thing in that, though, is that the pay grades are transparent. Everybody knows exactly what everybody else is making. And so there's a little bit of, well, you're not living beyond your means necessarily to your life circumstances, but it kind of helps keep everybody in the same strata, if you will. So with that, you're approaching it from, okay, some things are known, what grade you are, how much you're getting paid right now, that's visible. And the invisible below the surface stuff would be their background and their socioeconomic status and family of origin, everything that comes along with that. So they're in the military, they're getting moved around the US. Financial stressors are getting piled on. Particularly right now, one of the challenges many families face is housing allowance doesn't always keep up, especially in the inflation adjusted in the past years post-COVID, has created enormous housing stressors. So you've got that financial stress that many ordinary Americans who are living in one place, not having to move around frequently, may not experience. If you're stationed overseas, now you're getting COLA, with cost of living adjustments, which fluctuate based on the currency. So your pay, while most people think the military pay is like consistent, yes, basic pay is, and to the other extent other allowances are, but there's many things that impact variability, which again add another layer to this. Now you start adding in long absences and deployments. So now that creates financial challenges where one member of a household may be gone, military spouse staying home is kind of managing as the household CFO. So now you've got delegation of roles, responsibilities. Often typical academic research shows that happens pretty regularly in couples, right? But now you've got one spouse absent, distance, you create marital conflict. Probably not a surprise. Money is typically the number one reason cited for marriage, divorce in the military. And now you start adding in, like, okay, now let's take all that and throw in a dose of extra trauma from things like combat events. Okay. Money is the culture that we live in. It's the air we breathe, the water we swim in, and it touches every aspect of life. So it often will be the first live wire that shows up with these things, like spending decisions to get that dopamine hit to try to relieve the anxiety related to that, or a fear-based culture that gets amplified from a family of origin. And now you're seeing this level of deprivation, seeing friends and combat buddies and stuff like that going through the challenges of injury and care in military medical retirement, and now dealing with the VA system. So all these things come together. There's no one story when it comes to how military families and service members and veterans deal with it. But yeah, you start layering on an enormous amount of challenges that the average American does not experience and might be even difficult to relate to.
Yeah, I love the way that you frame that just in terms of the layers piece, because you're right. There are so many layers that, as you said, the average American just doesn't and can't experience, right? No fault to their own. But from a financial planning standpoint or for an advisor, being able to understand that there are multi-layers going on here that impact just the financial decision making piece too, and then you add on any potential trauma, whether that's from family of origin, right, or combat, if you will, like, it just amplifies the emotions around that oftentimes. Now we're talking a little bit kind of about like active duty service members, but there are a lot of veterans out there, right? A lot of veterans. And that transition from active duty to civilian life, I don't know how it was for you, but in my experience, at least working with couples, it was one of the most challenging life transitions that most couples and/or individuals experience. And again, I don't know how your experience was, but just from what I've seen, it is really incredibly challenging. What are for maybe advisors who are working with clients who are coming out of the military, let's just say kind of in that like 1 to 3 year kind of post active duty time frame, like what are some of these psychological considerations that, maybe show up or that you see or focus on kind of during this transition period?
Well, there's a huge amount of loss of identity that occurs because the military is not just a job, it's in most cases a way of life. It's the entire community that you have, most social circles built around that. So when you step away from that, either like I did prior to retirement or going all the way, most people vest for the military pension, military TRICARE for life, and things like that at the 20-year point or greater. You kind of have that bisection between the two, but you got veterans who are going to have a variety of experiences there. For most people who have a good plan coming in, right, it's going to leap into that next career and provide a lily pad, a jumping off point. But for many people, because that loss of identity, that loss of community is such a profound change, this is where you start to see other factors show up that may have been more well managed, like mental health conditions or a social support network. Because it's one thing when your sergeant says, hey, you got to show up every day and you got to clean your room and you got to do your duty. And if you don't, here's all these lists of resources, including chaplain and mental health and military family and life counselor. There's an enormous amount of resources and support that's built in automatically to the active duty structure. And you take away that structure. And if you aren't self-motivated or you're dealing with challenges that make that much more difficult, there are plenty of great resources out there that the VA does and excellent work. But most of the time, it's incumbent upon the veteran or people supporting the veteran to help them get that. It's not like the sergeant is dragging you to go and do it. So that's probably the biggest thing that comes to mind with that transition.
Yeah, I always would laugh, but not like to the client's face, but like kind of, inside that one of the biggest challenges that I would have service members or their spouses say is, what am I going to wear every
Yes,
day?
I miss putting on the uniform because it was zero decision.
Yeah, or like I would have like we talk about like in couples like where they would get into arguments because they would be going out and having to shop for like now quote work clothes. Like I have to go and buy clothes now for work, and that would create whether it was like budgeting like arguments or it was just the clothing piece, something that you maybe just don't think about or take for granted, right? For those of us that, yeah, it's totally normal that we have to pick our clothes out every day. We don't wear maybe a uniform. That would be just one of those things that would just cause sometimes a lot of distress financially, but also mentally, emotionally, and relationally as well. But I love that you mentioned the identity piece because it's so true. Like it is part of just who, these men and women like are. And to transition out of that, there can be, at least I've seen like clients feel very lost, kind of in that space. Now, I am curious, I guess, kind of going off of that, when you're talking with maybe more of like the family system. So, like the couple, like the service member, whether they are active duty or a veteran, and the spouse, the partner. How do you like approach financial planning conversations with those couples? And are there any dynamics, I guess, that you observe in particular?
I love using open-ended questions like many of your guests have talked about on this podcast before to kind of elicit, because more often than not, right, that household financial manager is the one who's booking a call. There are generally like a couple of pain points or things that cause people to reach out to hire me. Again, 4 out of 5 of my military clients who have hired me have done so with never working with a financial plan or financial advisor before. A few of them I got a sold a product here or there along the way. And so their financial complexity is rising. So the majority of my clients happen to be officers because that tends to be where things are going. So you've got managing many of them dual military. So you've got 2 careers going on. right? And so busy professional lives, having to figure out, all right, how do we delegate some of these decisions, get some additional support. So good open-ended questions about what's been working well for you up to this point. What are the challenges? Using scaling questions on a scale of 1 to 10. How confident are you to make some of these changes or implementations? Using the number below the answer and kind of using that self-talk. But a lot of it is also goes back to, for a traditional married couple who comes in, more often than not, the married service member is the one who's been deployed, doing all the kind of stuff. So it's that military spouse at home. So in many cases, with a heterosexual couple, that's the man out deployed, woman staying at home. And so in contrast to many classic financial planning couples that maybe listeners of this podcast might be, where the man might be running the show, the finances at home, it might be very different here. So don't going in with an assumption on who's running things, right? I mean, that'd be the biggest, probably most basic one to start
Yeah.
with. And then also just an understanding of, because you've got things like military pension to plan around, potential VA disability compensation, education benefits that can be transferred to kids. You've got a host of government benefits that offer up extra planning opportunities. So back to that loss of identity piece. Many of my people come in with an initial goal of, I want to be financially independent at military retirement. And many of them, because they are super savers, can be, especially dual military, like 20-year pensions at 43 years old. They probably don't need to work for income ever again. So it's like, okay, well, that's great. You're going to get bored after 6 months sitting on the beach. True story. I see that happen with clients pretty regularly. So let's talk about what's important, the meaning, the hopes, the fears, the dreams conversation, to start to build towards that now. The other thing that comes up pretty regularly is, with those super saver clients, this probably applies to all clients, not just military. It's like, all right, well, you're on track for even faster than you expect for some of your goals. So why don't we slow down and spend more now? The clients still get amazed, like, what? A financial planner is telling me to save less right now and spend
Yeah.
more, especially in some of those core memory years for kids in the household. Like one of my clients, they're stationed in Aviano right now in Italy, and they get to do that for 3 years. So I told them, all right, not too many times in your life when your kids are going to be this age and you get an uninterrupted time to explore and travel and fly the grandparents over and let's do all these things. So again, their jaws dropped. Like, what? We're going to spend that much extra over these next 3 years? Yes, because you've told me how that's important to you and why it makes sense in this season of life. So really just being that reflecting, that partner, that thinking partner to help clients understand what's important to them and then use money as a tool to do it. Much like I hope that all of our guests to this podcast listeners are already doing and shared.
Yeah, I would hope so too. And that's such, brilliant just advice right there, connecting that spending. And I love that you said, if we're going to be reaching that goal of financial independence like sooner, can we slow down and enjoy life in the here and now? I can only imagine. I'm like literally seeing like clients like the jaw like just drop at hearing you say that, or really any advisor, right? Because that wouldn't be something, right, that we would expect your advisor to say. But what a gift you are to those clients. At least I think so, right? That's such a gift to be able to give them, because you're right, especially for military clients where they have opportunities to be stationed in some really cool places. I will tell you that our time in Korea is just so near and dear, at least to my heart. Like, it's unforgettable. And I'm so thankful that we had that and took advantage of our time, especially before kids, because
Yes.
yeah, to be able to do that. So I love that you suggested there, especially if they're in good shape, like, can we slow down and just enjoy whatever that season it is of life that they're in? And also, can we go back to this dynamic that you talked about not assuming, right, from a gender
Yes.
standpoint?
Yes.
Yeah,
I thought that would be important to mention, because if you don't come from that world, you might come in with assumptions based on your other client interactions.
Absolutely. And it is true, like working with the female partner who would be behind, especially if their, their male husband, they were deployed, or, they were on TDY, right? So they were out training, somewhere else traveling, like they would be the ones holding down the fort, literally, from a financial standpoint. And so, yeah, I love that you mentioned that, like, not assuming right there. I'm curious, like, how would you like mentor or like kind of coach an advisor on on how to lead with like asking, like who runs the finances here? What are the roles here? Do you have any particular scripts or ways of framing that?
Well, the first clue is always looking at the email of the primary person who booked the Calendly appointment on my schedule. And
Okay.
second clue is, did they automatically invite their spouse's email in the Calendly link, or did they just both show up on the first one? And then it's like, because I use a Right Capital planning software, it's like, which of your emails should I send the first invite to kind of get things started, the ball rolling? Like an open-ended question like that. And that's usually the person's going to self-identify, or if they don't, the lesser interested or the one who doesn't do it as much will poke the other partner and be like, "Hey, it's your job. You
Hey,
do it."
it's you. It's you. Oh yeah, you can just send it to her. She'll take care of all that.
So
Yeah.
those tend to be like two innocuous ways to kind of do it. Again, just reading body language, understanding when you're asking good open-ended questions. Like one of my favorite ones in the discovery process is, imagine we're meeting 3 years from today and tell me what that feeling looks like. How does it feel to have accomplished the financial goals that and hopes, fears, and dreams you've talked about today, and seeing how they both respond to that. One of them may take a lead on that. But ultimately, again, back to the idea of not making assumptions. Both of them are going to want to be involved in the process. That's my goal. I want both of them to be engaged. And I will say, I'd say over half of my married couples who hire me explicitly state in the process at some point or another, I'm hiring you because I want my spouse, my partner, to be more informed, more knowledgeable, to bring in an expert or another person who can help us do this better.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. All right, Daniel. Last question here. This might be another deep one. I feel bad. I feel like I've just
That's
like I
good.
set you up and I was like, this is gonna be so easy. We're gonna talk about your favorite thing. And then I hit you with like some really like deep and heavy questions. But I cannot get off of this call with at least asking you about some of just your own insights or strategies around or when it comes to like intergenerational planning or even legacy planning. How or what are some of what are some insights there? What should advisors like keep in mind from, kind of the psychology or emotional place when it comes to that?
Yeah, you referenced my love of estate planning earlier, so I'm excited to circle back to this because it is such a key topic. Understanding where clients are at and not having one, and just whether they know it or not, that lack of peace, that lack of confidence in their plan bleeds over into so many other areas. And so having created an estate planning process where we help clients implement and actually get the plan done in-house with some of our back office team and support through some of the technology that now enables advisors to do that, really just transforms their personal confidence level. We have clients self-assess across a wide variety of areas where they feel confident in, including cash flow and retirement and savings and spending, and conflict in their relationships. And inevitably, estate planning tends to always be one of, if not the always lowest score confidence. Even if they've done it, even if they've, say, got their documents from the JAG or hired an estate planning and done it, very rarely do I find that clients actually understand them. So taking the time, not as someone giving law advice, I'm not an attorney, I'm not trying to venture into UPL, unauthorized practice of law, but education tied to their financial planning goals, the hopes, fears, and dreams that they talked about. Like, how do we care and love on your spouse, your minor children? We referenced it earlier with my personal story, but in addition to working with military, I work with a lot of Gold Star widows and young widows in general. And so I get to see lots and lots of situations in which things were done well, and in many cases where things were not. So using those to weave the stories to help clients find their own self-motivation, that whole trans-theoretical model of change, right? Getting clients ready to take action on this. But inevitably, when we've gone through the process, they finish their own personal estate plan. Just the level of confidence and peace of mind that spills over. It's like a beachhead that allows so much extra progress in other areas of the financial life, which then leads to I wonder if mom and dad have this estate plan. I don't know that we've ever talked to them about that. Or they'll ask me, how should we talk to mom and dad about this? I'm like, well, tell what it was like for you. Share your own personal story. We didn't know what we didn't know, or we thought we had a plan and we didn't have a plan. And now we've talked to Daniel and we've learned all these things. We've read this stuff and we've got it. And here's what it did for us, and use that as an opening door. And inevitably clients will come back and say, wow, we had a good conversation. Or, I didn't think my parents would even talk about this. And now, so not going up one generation, starting to open up those doors, and now obviously changing the money narrative, the money story for their own children. and modeling what that behavior can look like and starting to have those open, transparent conversations. There's just so many powerful benefits. I can't recommend enough to financial planners to find a way to integrate this into your process beyond just a cursory review of estate planning documents, but to educate, to teach, to empower clients to understand whether they have an estate plan. I mean, they have one, it's just defined by the state and probate, but what it would look like if their own estate plan reflected all of that.
Yeah, I love that. I'm glad that you shared that. One of the things that I would hear often, and it's something for advisors to keep in mind, is that would have a lot of military clients that they would say, yeah, well, I just know that like she gets everything if I die. Or like, yeah, I've got a will. And like, yeah, I mean, pretty much just says like she gets everything. She and the kids get everything, like if I die. And they probably do have that in place, but I really appreciate what you mentioned just about educating a little bit further, because more than likely, service members, active duty, they're going to have something like basic in place. That doesn't mean that they really understand everything there. It also doesn't mean that it can't be better. It can't be, something that really does focus more on the legacy really that they want to leave and what they want. So for advisors, if, you have clients, military clients say, yeah, I've got a will in place. And like, yeah, I mean, she gets everything. Take that time. And I would imagine you would probably agree, Daniel, but like take that time to maybe dig a
Yes.
little bit deeper. Is that fair? Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And like, if they don't have an estate plan, like, well, using the idea of what would be important to you. I always like asking the opening question, what does the words estate planning mean to you? And then using that to lead into, have you seen it done well? Have you seen it done poorly? So leveraging those personal stories, personal examples, because inevitably most people have seen probably done poorly more often than done well, and use that as a way to kind of get that self-motivation going. So you can tie it back to, we mentioned resistance earlier related to like, well, nothing's going to happen to me. I'm invincible. It's like, well, let's talk about that, right? How many people in your career field like has something happened to, right? It doesn't have to be in combat or training, right? Just one of my most recent clients, his spouse died from melanoma at 26.
Oh my gosh.
And so, we can't control those things. So we can control what we do today. And the financial plan, the empowerment, the education that we as advisors, as planners can do, can bridge that gap so powerful.
Yeah. Yeah. I appreciate that. Well, Daniel, our time is sadly coming to an end. I hate it because I could sit here and talk military clients for a lot longer than what this podcast episode is going to be able to record. But thank you for coming on and for sharing all of your wisdom here with us today. As we are wrapping up, is there one or two maybe takeaways that for advisors listening who have either an interest in working with military clients or resources where maybe they can learn more if they have military clients and want to do better, one or two takeaways that you might leave them with?
Yeah. So for those who might be interested in learning more about this as a career changer or someone getting into that space, I host a podcast called Military to Financial Planner. You were just most recently a guest on that as well. And we share the stories of those who have been in that space and how they got into it. It's primarily intended for those career changing into financial planning careers, but there's many great parallels for learning about how to do planning well based on people who come from that background. I'm also a founding member of the Military Financial Advisors Association, MFAA. So it's a group of us who are fee-only financial planners who are all military spouses or veterans ourselves. And we've come together to kind of coordinate our marketing and be a collaborative environment. So we host a monthly mastermind on Zoom. We have an internal Slack channel that is open for people who are interested in serving the military community and want to come in, just pop in and ask questions, things like that. And then there's also a new qualification, the designation Military Qualified Financial Planner, MQFP. You can learn more about that, mqfp.org. And it's a way to, again, demonstrate some expertise for those of in the military tribe to the broader community at large. So 3 resources I'd love for people to check out.
Yeah, we'll make sure that we include those in the show notes, links to all of those. Thank you. I didn't know about the new certification there. Yeah, so that's
Yeah,
interesting. I appreciate you sharing. I'm going to check that out. And I'm going to send it to Clayton as well. He doesn't know it, but I'll be sending that to
there you go.
him there as well. Well, thank you, Daniel, for joining us. And thank you to all of you for tuning in and allowing Daniel and I into your ears and into your mind today. If you found value in today's episode, we'd both would love to stay connected with you. Daniel, I'm speaking for you here, my friend,
Yes.
but you can follow both of us on LinkedIn. That is at least where I hang out. Daniel, where do you hang out mostly?
LinkedIn would be best, yes.
LinkedIn would be best. Awesome. You can hang out with us on LinkedIn, where at least I share, and Daniel, you share too, reshare a lot of great resources and strategies out there around working with clients. You can also subscribe to our weekly newsletter at beyondthefp.com, where I share exclusive resources and strategies that you can use in your practice. Don't forget to follow the show wherever you get your podcasts so that you never miss an episode like this one. And remember, my friends, finances don't have feelings, but your clients do. Until next time, keep planning, keep growing, and keep going beyond.